Hey American Lit, it's Miss Mav. I wanted to go over a useful tool for poetry analysis that I think will help you guys through this Fireside Poet unit. And the name of this analysis tool is called TPCASTT. It is an acronym for title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shift, title, and theme. And I've used this method a bunch of times to help students in the classroom navigate their way through really difficult poems. So let's review some vocabulary before we get started. You need to know the difference between a literal meaning and a figurative meaning. A literal meaning is the exact meaning. Some would call this the dictionary meaning. It is literal language is language that means exactly what is said. Figurative, obviously, is the opposite of literal. It's language that means more than what it says on the surface. These are phrases or words that we need to interpret, to find the emotional purpose behind them. The difference between denotation and connotation. Denotation is similar to your literal meaning. It is the dictionary definition. Connotation is the suggested meaning of a word or phrase. It is something that we need to infer. For example, if you were to look up the word home or mother in the dictionary, you would find the denotative meaning. However, what does home represent in the connotation? It could mean safety or protection. It could mean love. Mother could mean protector in the connotative meaning. Or, again, safe. You get the idea. So I want you to create the following outline on a piece of paper just as it looks on the next slide. And then we're going to use this method to TPCASTT one of your poems called When I Heard the Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman. And it was in your Fireside, I think it was one of your Fireside poems. So you will notice that on this handout, you just need to create a column that has title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shifts, title, and theme, and then leave plenty of space on the right so that you can fill this in as we go along. I would pause after each slide so you can take some notes. You can always go back to this video once we're done, obviously, but if you don't want to have to do it twice, just pause it and you can write stuff down as we go. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the title, right? Let's go back here and look at the title. When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. So without even reading, we're going to write down what we think this poem is about based on the title. What predictions can you make about the poem from the title? So I simply wrote the title could indicate that the speaker is going to learn something from an astronomer, maybe in class. Okay? Simple. Do not overthink it. It doesn't have to be long. So now that we've made our prediction, now we're going to read the poem. So I'm going to read this to you. When I heard the learned astronomer. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams, to add, divide, and measure them. When I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room. How soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out I wandered off by myself, in the mystical moist night air, and from time to time looked up in the perfect silence at the stars. So our next task is paraphrase. Now, paraphrase can be done in one of two ways. The first way is you simply write a summary of what took place in the poem in your own words. Not very complicated. You want to try to be as detailed as you can without, being extremely specific. Another way to do a paraphrase is literally you do a line-by-line translation. So if your poem has 8 lines, right? You have 8 lines in this poem, then your paraphrase will have 8 lines. I would definitely do this type of paraphrase, a line-by-line translation, if you are seriously struggling with a poem and having extreme difficulty. It might be more work, and it might be a little more tedious. However, it definitely will help you in the long run understand the poem better, I promise you. But for the sake of time, we're going to write simply a summary in our own words of what happened in the poem. So what I wrote down is the speaker is sitting in class, listening to his astronomy teacher lecture. The teacher is providing materials, and his classmates applaud the teacher, indicating their admiration or like of the teacher or lesson. However, the speaker does not seem to share the same opinion as he leaves the class to go outside and look at the stars to escape the boredom of the classroom. Simple. Our next task, and this is one of the more difficult ones, is connotation. What might the poem mean beyond the literal level? So you notice that paraphrase, it's asking literally what happened in the poem, right? We're not interpreting. We're just, what happened? We need facts. Here, we are looking for the suggested. This is where you look for your literary elements. Imageries, metaphors, similes, personification, symbolism, idioms, alliteration, rhyme scheme, so on and so forth. I always have students ask, well, how many should I find in a poem? As many as you can. The more you're able to identify the figurative language, the easier your analysis will be at the end. And eventually, when you write poetic analysis in an essay, which you do in this unit, the more information you have, the more you have to write with, right? So, but for the sake of time again, I just chose three connotations for us to look at. One, I said the poem is written in free verse, meaning it does not have a specific rhyme or line scheme. This type of poetic form creates the illusion the poet is having an ongoing conversation with the reader, or maybe he's just having a conversation with himself. He is just focusing on releasing his thoughts. Number two, I wrote imagery. When I sitting heard the astronomer, where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable I became tired and sick. And I felt that these lines clearly paint the picture of a student who is clearly bored in the classroom and does not find it beneficial to listen to a lecture about stars when he can go outside and look at them. Imagery is a common figurative language that you guys will be able to identify quite easily. Metaphors and similes are generally easy for you guys to identify, but always try to look for alliteration, rhyme scheme, symbolism if there's a repeated idea, but here there is none. Tone. In the first 4 lines of the poem, the speaker is clearly frustrated, almost intolerant of the lecture. But when the speaker leaves the room, his tone changes to one of peacefulness, like he is much more relaxed outside, looking at the stars than he is in the room, listening about them. Okay? Again, these are just 3 of, there could be others. Attitude. Now here again, it's a little repetitive, but you describe the tone of the poem. What is the poet's attitude towards the subject of the poem? What is the speaker's attitude? Now the speaker and the poet may not always be the same person. We know it's the same person here because Walt Whitman uses the personal I. So we know that the personal I indicates that this poet is speaking about himself. So again, the tone of the speaker is one of disinterest in the astronomer's lesson. After being given charts and diagrams, he became tired and sick of listening to this person speak and leaves the room. We can also use words such as bored or frustrated to describe the speaker's feelings towards this teacher. And the subject really is the teacher, this lecture, or this teacher who is giving this lecture. Shift. Is there a change in the tone or the speaker of the poem? Is there a change in the attitude of the speaker? And yes, there definitely is a shift. And the shift occurs when he leaves the room and walks outside. We know that in the first 4 lines, the tone was one of frustration and boredom, like we said. But when he leaves the classroom and gets outside, we know that he is kind of more content, finding almost like he's at peace with himself. And I use this line here because I find that when he says, I looked up in the perfect silence at the stars, that sort of embodies how calm he feels being outside rather than being inside learning about astronomy. The title. Again, we go back to the title. Now that we've read the poem, now that we've analyzed it, now that we've found the literal and figurative meaning, what do we think about the poem? Have our ideas changed? Does the title still hold the same meaning? And I wrote that I think the title is one of irony, because while the speaker can attest that the astronomer is indeed intelligent, he does not learn anything from him, right? So I kind of felt that it was sort of contradictory. Last but not least, we have theme, and this is one of the more difficult ideas for you guys to identify. What is the overall theme? What is the lesson or truth we're supposed to learn after this poem, right? So I wrote down 2. There can be more, there can be just one. It depends on the poem. It depends on what you learned from the poem. And when you write down the theme, it is not something, a detail that you get from the poem. It is a statement that all can relate to. Any one of us can. So the first one I wrote was, knowledge can only come from experience. Because I felt that the poet or the speaker here was trying to tell us that by sitting in the classroom, he wasn't learning anything by just being there. He was taking up space, right, listening to a lecture. But he wanted to experience the stars. He wanted to be outside where he can actually experience them and learn from them. 2, it is okay to go against the crowd, to be the one that stands up against the majority and speak or show your opinion. He, as a speaker, he's the only one that does not agree or does not feel that the astronomer did a great job in the classroom. While his classmates applaud, he leaves. So that clearly shows that he is not afraid to go against the grain. He's not afraid to stand up for what he believes in. All right, and that's it. So I hope this helped. I hope this will help you. And I think that it will, if you give it a chance. I know it's a little more work, but I think if you put in this time, it definitely will help you better understand many of the poems, or at least some of the poems you come across in your Fireside unit. Now for your extra credit, okay? I want you to choose one poem from the Fireside Poets, and I want you to complete a TPCAST. You're going to create this handout in an email or Word doc, and you're going to submit it to me via email. And you're going to email to brooke.mavretich@henry.k12.ga.us, okay? If it is done well, I will give you 10 extra credit points on a unit test for the Fireside Poets. And you need to do this before you finish the unit. So be sure to get this into me before you finish your Fireside unit, before you take that test, okay? So if you have any questions about what I went over, please feel free to email me or to text me or call me, and I'll be sure to further explain anything you were confused on. But I really hope this helped, guys. Good luck on your next TPCAST.